Yes, that is a man painting trees green.
I've painted dry evergreens years ago in Canada.
And this is a field of stones. Tens of thousands of them attached to rebar that have been planted one by one in the soil.
What does he care if someone puts stones on rebar in China?
Here we see some aunties painting a lawn. Now this is actually legitimate. This is something I'll explain later. There's nothing wrong with this.
No surprise here. He doesn't get back to it. But the only reason he says that's okay is because it's quite popular in the US, especially in the southern states.
大家看看这石头钢筋上穿的石头弄这么多。
So he's just like, take a look here, you know, we've got stones or rocks on top of rebar, and so many.
一排一排的，这是干啥用的？
He's like, you know, one by one. He's like, what the hell are these for? Loose translation.
有没有知道的？
He says, like, does anybody know? Well, I actually have a little bit more insight in a back and forth of a conversation he had by text.
What did he just say?
Well, I actually have a little bit more insight in a back and forth of a conversation he had by text. And
It is exactly this kind of vague verbiage that these guys use for deception. You might actually think that he had a conversation with the guy or a text correspondence. He didn't. They used exactly this kind of vague verbiage in the first 2 years that they were in the US to give the impression that they might still be in China.
And, well, the answer is so that it can trick aerial photography. So why is this happening? Why are they painting the side of the roads green? Why are they planting rocks? Well, it all boils down to pollution. China only really started taking this stuff seriously about 10 years ago.
And there it is. SideburnsZA finally giving a shout out to Xi Jinping, who came to power 10 years ago.
You see, before then, factories and industry were allowed to run rampant. And you would have this terrible situation where a factory would be producing some kind of a plastic or some chemical process, and all the sort of runoff from the process would just be dumped into the local rivers. The government decided that it was really time to start to take green initiatives seriously. And to do so, they started to introduce these ecological requirements for local governments. In other words, they would tell a local city, a local town, a local province, hey, listen, we need you to cut down on your emissions. We need you to ensure that you are doing some environmental renewal programs, things like that. And they put these mandates out there.
Wrong again, dummy. Being from an industrial background, I have a pretty good idea of what happened. Under Xi Jinping's government, things were changed. So the federal government went from punishing the polluters to punishing the people enforcing the rules. To my knowledge, China has very strict safety and environmental laws, but corruption made for weak enforcement. Going after those corrupt officials made a huge difference almost overnight. I used to stop on top of the river on the way to work to see what color it was for the day. That's all changed now, and the rivers are teeming with aquatic wildlife.
That's why you plant these stones, so that aerial photographs and satellite photos and the inspector who's up on a mountain, that they take him to a very specific spot, when he looks down, it looks as if the crops are there, and it looks as if everything is thriving.
Who really thinks that an aerial view of those rocks on rebar would look like the crops are there and everything's thriving? Just to be clear, I can't say for sure, 100% certainty, what the rocks on rebar are. But he seems to think that he knows, and he even made a video about it. He doesn't know either, though, when it comes right down to it. I looked around and I found several texts, basically a couple of them saying the same thing he says. It's hiding something from the government. But I also saw other texts that said it was some kind of a new flower that's going to bloom later in the summer. I saw other texts that said it was a new kind of military radar installation. And I saw yet other texts that said it's a safety product for if you're falling from the sky, that you wouldn't be injured by the rebar. It was all basically joking and nothing confirming what it actually is.
Anyway, I don't want to be preachy here, but please look into it yourself, and you might be quite shocked to see that planting stones and destroying the world go hand in hand.
Okay, I did, and I see something completely different than you in the video. It definitely is not farmland. Look at the park lighting and the open area and the seating. The rock art installation seems to wrap around that area. It seems to be a public area with a poorly executed, in my opinion, art exhibit. So I did find an aerial photo. Let's take a look at it and see if it looks like everything is thriving. Everything's thriving. No, to me it doesn't. Okay, let me zoom in a little closer and take a look at what it really looks like. I think they're trying to spell something out. Maybe for the American spy balloons. Looks like SideburnsZA. Socks.
Don't let people try to explain any of this nonsense away with a per capita argument or anything like that.
Why would he say that? Maybe because the US is like number 12 in the world for polluters, and China happens to be number 24 per capita, having even 4.5 times the number of people as the US. This video is taken in Shenzhen, a city of more than 14 million people. Look at the birds. You see the birds in the water? What do you think they're doing? They're fishing. This must all have happened after he left, because he never saw any birds in China.